What is going on, you guys? Today I have another super quick episode. We're going to be reviewing a episode from the School of Greatness podcast with Lewis Howes. He's interviewing a guy named Dr. Daniel Amen, and the title is How to Cure Brain Fog, or How to Achieve Mental Clarity. Let's get into it.
What would you call that? Is it in the beginning of the day and the end of the day? What is that strategy called? Is it just mental focus? Is it gratitude?
Well, when people come to my clinic, we often do some neuropsych testing, and one of the tests is negativity bias versus positivity bias.
What's the difference between those two?
Well, negativity bias is you're focused on what's wrong. Your brain quickly, almost immediately goes to what you're afraid of, what's negative, and the news will tell you all sorts of things to be afraid of. Positivity bias is you go to what's right.
And basically, where your energy goes is where that's how you feel all the time. So if you keep focusing on negative things, you're gonna keep feeling that way, right? So obviously, good to shift it to positive things.
So those two techniques are part of what I talk about in the new book, positivity bias training. How do you train your brain to look for what's right, not for just what's wrong? Now, it's not over the top, because I've been thinking about this Bible verse a lot lately. The beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord. And it used to always sort of bother me. I'm like, why do I have to be afraid? And then I realized people who have low levels of anxiety die early from accidents or preventable illnesses.
They're not worried about anything. They die earlier, is what you're saying.
Right. And often the people that go to jail, they have low levels of anxiety. They actually have slower heart rates. They have lower sweat gland activity.
Interesting.
Right? Like if I think I'm going to go rob a store, well, I don't, because I don't want to be caught.
Right.
And I don't like institutional food, and I don't really look good in an orange jumpsuit. Right? And so I'm always thinking ahead. And one of the lies of happiness, so I open You Happier with the lies of happiness, is don't worry, be happy. So Bobby McFerrin's Grammy Award-winning song, Don't Worry, Be Happy, is a lie. Because you need some anxiety so you do the right things.
Sure.
And doing the right things consistently help you be happy.
Yeah, so you have a moral code, you're doing the right habits for yourself, you're not just like, I'm not gonna care, I'm gonna drink all day, I'm gonna eat whatever I want, everything's gonna be fine. You wanna have some, well, if I do this action, there might be a negative reaction later as well.
Right, 50% of people 85 and older will be diagnosed with dementia. I'm not okay with that. Those are bad odds, right? Because we're living longer, and I don't want a 50.
It's an interesting concept, right? I mean, but really what he's saying, it's not like to focus more, or it's okay to have a little anxiety. I mean, sure, we're all going to have a little bit, right? I think he's saying to avoid living your life based out of fear. But also some of these things, I mean, they're really just common sense, like sticking to morals, having good ethics, right? Knowing not to do certain things, right? Just staying a good person, right? Because, it makes no sense to do some of those things that he talked about.
Percent chance of having lost my mind. Now, but I can't start thinking about that when I'm 83. I need to be thinking about that when I'm 43 or 33, right? I mean, the earlier you can, the more you can push off those negative effects. So not too much anxiety, because the cortisol damages your brain, but enough. It's like a dose response. What's the right dose of anxiety?
Sure.
And
That's kind of interesting, because cortisol, if you don't know, is the stress hormone. So whenever you get anxiety, etc., that's what's bubbling up in your body, the chemicals, and why you feel more anxious, more negative or stressed or something. So a lot of people live in a constant state of anxiety, which is more than they probably need, right? So most people, the brain is just trying to protect them, which is good, right? But it's also sometimes keeping you in a state of fight or flight subconsciously, and you got to be aware of that. Basically what he's saying, in a nutshell of all this, is becoming self-aware, so you can get to the point where this anxiety isn't controlling you in your life. Sure, there's going to be a little bit, but you're able to still live a positive life outside of it.
Psychiatrists, I used to think my job was to lower the anxiety in my patients, and that's true for some patients. It's not true for other patients. I need to raise their anxiety.
So what would you say are the three main causes of someone more likely to reach a dementia state over 85, or before that even? What would those things be, the three bad habits or the causes of dementia, would you say?
So
that increase those chances?
In the book, I actually talk about our Bright Minds approach to preventing dementia. So there's 11, but if I had to pick a couple, it would be being overweight. Because if you're overweight or have high blood sugar, there's something I call diabesity. It's a combination. You actually have 7 of the 11 risk factors, because I published 3 studies, the last one on 33,000 people, that said as your weight goes up, the actual size and function of your brain goes down, virtually in a linear pattern. So
does it happen if you're 30 years old and you're younger, or is it like only when
happens
you reach...
in children.
Really?
Yeah. So we had 2 data sets, one in children, one in adults, drops.
The function and the size of the brain
Function
shrinks.
and size, because it lowers blood flow to the brain. Obesity lowers blood flow to the brain. It ages the brain. It increases inflammation. Fat cells store toxins. It changes your hormones, takes healthy testosterone and turns it into unhealthy cancer-promoting forms of estrogen. This is not a good thing. And so if I had to go, don't be overweight. Now, don't be underweight. Underweight's not good for you, right? Have a reasonable
healthy weight,
BMI, be a healthy weight.
Well, and something worth noting too, because like there's all sorts of reasons that lead to someone being overweight, but doing what you can to control that, right? Like changing your habits, even little things, right? Like you think that most people don't look to these first, like drinking the recommended amount of water per day, eating in like a caloric surplus if you're underweight, or a deficit if you're overweight, right? But not too much of a deficit, right? Like there's like a healthy amount to do it. You don't want to eat too little. Eating the right things, of course. Sleeping enough, like always sleeping at the right time, getting consistent, 8 hours or so. And also, of course, the gym, right? Like that's the clear one. But I like what he's saying here, because no matter the reason that you reach that point, there's a lot of basics that can get you back to like a healthy weight, healthy fitness. But I've actually seen this a lot with guys. Basically, they start to have some success in their business. Like they start their business so they can have financial freedom, and then they no longer have time freedom, and then they become overweight, and then they say, in retrospect, man, I wish I had the health of someone who's like, in shape, right? Like eating well, going to the gym, right? Like who's physically fit, because I would give anything to have my health and my time back rather than this money, right? Because you can always get more money, but you can't get your time or your health back. So just keep that in mind.
And you don't want anything to damage your blood vessels.
And by the way, it's better to be preventative, not like trying to fix it once you're in the situation, right? You want to prevent it from happening in the first place, so actually building these habits beforehand.
Because they found neurons, brain cells, actually don't age. It's your blood vessels that age. Okay. And if your blood vessels aren't feeding your brain cells, they begin to die. And so with all of these risk factors, how do I know if I have it? So SPEC, this imaging study I do, looks at blood flow. If you're drinking caffeine, if you're using nicotine, if you're sedentary, if you have any form of heart disease, if you have high blood pressure, all of those decrease blood flow to your brain. So you always want to increase blood flow. And I love this part, because when I get someone brain healthy, their sex lives get better. Because if you have blood flow problems anywhere, like you have erectile dysfunction, you have brain dysfunction. And if you have brain dysfunction, odds are you also have sex dysfunction, because they're connected. It's about blood flow, right? The healthier your blood flow. And so, I see a lot of 50, 60-year-old guys, and they're worried about their mom had Alzheimer's disease. They don't want to get it. But when they get on the program, their sex lives are better. And that makes me so happy for them.
Now, there's something you touched on a little bit ago about the negativity bias and the positivity bias. I like to believe that I think in a positive way. I see the perspective of a situation. I try to look at the good perspective of the situation. I try to appreciate the things that I have as opposed to things that I lack. I try to have compassion and empathy for certain situations and say, that's really unfortunate, so I should be extremely grateful for where I'm at. In all areas of my life, I try to have that perspective. I feel like it's a positive bias, right? Because it makes me feel better. There's been a lot of talk lately with different researchers and professors talking about the negative effects of, call it toxic positivity, or too much positivity, I guess. Is there is there really a negative effect to the brain if you're thinking positively all the time? So can you be toxic in the way you think in a positive way?
So I'm actually not a fan of positive thinking. I'm a fan of accurate thinking with a positive bias. Because positive thinking is I can have this third brownie and it won't hurt me. I can drive at 125 miles an hour down the freeway in the rain and it's not dangerous.
Well, yeah, I mean that's basically pretty common sense, I would say. Like just being realistic and positive at the same time. Like because those things he's saying, right? It's like, well, of course the brownie is going to hurt you, right? Of course you're speeding down the freeway, the highway is going to hurt you, right? It's just like you, not like he was saying earlier, right? Like not cutting off the blood flow to your brain, so you actually make smart decisions.
And give my phone number to a woman I met in a bar and not be thinking about the potential downsides of that. Especially if I'm married and I want to stay married.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right, I have this one friend, he came in and he told me about this woman he'd met at a medical conference, and they were on a plane together and she'd been to his office, and I looked at him and I'm like, do you like attorneys? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, you're married, you have ADD, you're not going to cover up this affair, your wife's going to find out, you're going to lose half your net worth, and you're going to be visiting your children on the weekends. And he's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, which means his frontal lobes weren't working, because the front part of your brain not only thinks of the moment, it thinks of all of the moments, right? If I do this, what happens? And too often, people that have the most sadness, it's because they made bad decisions. And that can be toxic positivity. Like, oh, I'm in the moment, where I want people to be in all of the moments.
Sure.
not just now,
the future moments.
Now and later.
Yeah, well, that's just being self-aware and thinking critically too.
Right, I want people to feel better quickly.
Yes.
With things that help them feel good now and tomorrow.
Right. Okay, so I like that. Accurate thinking with a positive bias. Yeah, accurate thinking. Okay. Is there such thing as toxic positivity in your mind?
Well, it could be.
Yeah.
It's like, don't worry, be happy.
Right.
It's like,
You
no
don't like
matter
that
what I
much,
do
yeah.
today, it's not going to impact me tomorrow. I can spend, I can max my credit cards, I can flirt with a girl even though I'm in a committed relationship.
I can drink all I want, I can eat all I want, yeah.
Yeah,
Don't
that's
worry about
toxic positivity.
Well, that's just poor decision making.
it. Yeah.
It's like, no, you need to be afraid, right? I mean, you came to my clinic and we looked at your brain, and it's like, no, I want to love my brain. So if I love my brain, I avoid these things and I do those things. And then you have a better life.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, right, like that's just essentially like loving yourself and making the right decisions because of that, so you can love others more effectively, have a more fulfilling life, right? So definitely an interesting episode there. Interesting perspectives. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Drop a comment below. If you like the video, of course, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. You got this, bro.